Welcome, Dweebazoids. It's me, Stony, and you're joining us for the next episode of the Large Blast podcast, where we're taking a trip to the Motor Museum. Expect all things 40k, but vehicle-based later on in the show. But first, we like to get things cracking with a little something we call Hobbies Going On. How was that one this time, Matt?
Yeah, spot on, Stony. That was really good.
So, Matt, what have you been up to this week?
Starting some guardsmen, but really haven't done a great deal. I still haven't repaired my basilisk.
Well, this is very negative for somebody that posted one of the coolest Emperor's champions I've ever seen this week.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, I did. I mean, I think I'd finished it when we recorded the last episode, but I'd taken the photos, so I posted them. So yeah, hobby wise, it's been basically playing around with some photography and not painting a lot. Well,
it looks great. There's nothing better than seeing the champion of the Emperor atop a pile of filthy dead Xenos.
Yeah, that's right. What about you though? What have you been up to?
I've been doing not very much painting either, actually. I've been editing together a video, which will be up by the time this episode goes out, of me painting Stoney's female gang leader that he designed on ZBrush, which you can get from our Cults 3D if you're interested. But I put together a little video of me painting that. It's got a little clip of how he designed it at the start and then my paint process and paint scheme for it. I'm really happy with how it turned out, actually. I got to do lots of leopard print and tiger print and loads of fun, bright colours that I never get to use in my Black Templars and my Raven Guard. So it was a good test to try something new. So yeah, check that video out if you're listening to this. And if you're interested in getting 3D models of your own, you've got your own 3D printer, then check out our Cults 3D. So what about you, Stoney? What have you been up to?
Yeah, what have you been up to, mate?
Oh, shit. I keep forgetting he's not actually here. Wait a minute. What's this?
Hello everyone, it's your old buddy Stoney here, calling from the future. As you know, I was recently sent to the year 40,000 to fight alongside the Ultramarines. You guys know, you were there. Stop asking questions. I'm just sending you a quick update, really. It's Bobbins here in the year 40,000, and I'm pretty sure I'm doing really bad as a Space Marine. I accidentally killed half of my fellow rookie squad when I was supposed to throw a grenade into some advancing Gene Stealers, but accidentally threw my packed lunch at them. The other half of the squad died at lunchtime when I pulled the pin out of a grenade, thinking it was a travel can of Coke from said lunchbox, which I'd thrown away earlier. So I thought, you know what, I better go and ask Gilliman about some of this, about how to be a better Ultramarine. But I tried to catch him, but him and his mate Iliad were just on his way to his room, and I think they must have been like watching tennis really loud or something by the noises that was coming out of there. But then I remembered to myself, you know what, I've got all the answers, don't I? Because they give you a Codex Astartes, so I've got a Codex Astartes, so I thought, I should just read this. This has got all the answers in it. So I sat down and I finally read the Codex Astartes.
The Codex Astartes by Reboot Gilliman. A good solution, applied with vigour now, will always be better than the perfect solution applied 10 minutes too late. Strike whilst the enemy is at its weakest, even if an opponent's supply lines are the lifeblood of their army and should be a priority target. Trust in the teachings of the Codex. In there you will find everything you need to defeat the mutant, the heretic, and the Xenos. The Xenos can be recognised by their flamboyant clothing, which is often very form-fitted attire. The Eldari in particularly can be noticed due to their rocking bodies and tight clothing. Cold showers are often needed when in prolonged engagements with sexy Xenos races to prevent field boners. Remember to try really hard not to imagine their supple Eldar bodies naked and undulating in front of you. The Emperor doesn't want you to have a sexy Xenos girlfriend, so just don't even think about it. I mean, I guess it would be okay if you were like undercover or some shit, infiltrating the Eldar, and then the only way that they'd be able to believe you were one of them is if you banged a few of them, right? Or something like that, or if you get captured by a load of sexy town girls and they needed, I don't know, samples. Making love to a Gene Stealer is not advisable, but also not impossible. It is important to gently caress the cloaca, as well as the hormonal glands, in order to get them. I mean, is it so wrong to bang an orc when you really think about it? They're caked up, that's right, I said it. I know you've seen it too. They've got badonkadonks on them, and Papa Gilliman likes it a lot.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I guess it turns out that the Codex Astartes is really a kind of a Kama Sutra for banging aliens. Yeah, so see you soon.
Well, it was great to hear from him, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, lovely, lovely, lovely.
Hopefully he'll be back soon. It is Christmas coming up after all.
Yeah, that's true. Should we talk about the news?
Let's do it.
Finance, cutting-edge technology. Accurate information, it's the Large Blast podcast news. Hear every episode.
What's better than a big Santa's sack at Christmas? A big bonus. Yep, Games Workshop are handing out bonuses to all of their retail staff, and all of their staff, in fact, which is amazing. What do you think?
Yeah, I saw this. £2,500 bonuses going out. £7.5 million worth of bonus pool. I mean, we and a lot of people out there do a lot of moaning about Games Workshop sometimes. But it's nice to see that still, despite some clearly kind of big capitalist moves to the website and stuff, they're still being pretty nice to the people that work for them and putting some of those profits that they've got down onto the staff. 12% profit rise this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen some people question online whether it's proof that they're overcharging their customers, but I don't know. I don't really know how it works, because there's other companies in the UK where you're almost like a shareholder, and I don't know whether it's the same thing with Games Workshop. I don't know if they have to give the bonus out. It seems to be implied that they've decided to give the bonus out.
Mm-hmm. But they said, reading into the article a bit more, that the first half of the year was where a lot of these profits came, and it's been much slower in the second half, and they've basically all just been attributed to the release of 10th edition.
Yeah,
which was the big profit bump this year, and that the second year has gone down. And also it said in this article, this is all from the Guardian newspaper, I was reading this, that the income from licensing had actually decreased. So this is actually, the income increase is from core games, from actually selling plastic kits, rather than from chucking the GW name on all kinds of products. Interesting, I thought.
The other thing, so the article we've got up at the moment, it says it's a bonus pool, and unlike, as I say, like having share options as someone working for the company, it could be that they just all the staff are aware that if they reach a certain percentage of profit level, that the rest of that profit percentage will go into a pool. So it's kind of in everybody's interests during the year to just make sure that bonus pool is topped up by making good profits. I mean, this is all completely irrelevant. This is a Warhammer podcast, not a
No, but it's cool to know, like, these are the people at the end of the day. I know most of us listening probably buy our models from secondary sources or eBay or your local gaming store, but I still like the fact that there are Games Workshops, and I refuse to call them Warhammer, on the high street. I like being able to pop in every now and then and buy some bits, or just have a chat with a friendly member of staff.
Yeah.
The Brighton shop is our local shop, and it's got 3 staff in most of the time you go in now. So they've got more people in. They all, super nice guys and really helpful. So it's good to see them getting something back.
And we it's such a, we've said before, Games Workshop has got like an almost perfect business model, because probably for all of the staff that they're giving this 2.5k bonus to, half of that's going to be spent back on Warhammer.
Exactly.
It's a self-fulfilling cycle.
Well, then, sports fans, we got a bit of Blood Bowl news. We talk about Blood Bowl sometimes because everyone on the show plays it, even though it's not 40k. And I just spotted in the news roundup for the past few weeks that currently on sale are some of the coolest Blood Bowl models, but they're on that made to order for the next month. It's the cheerleaders. I think the female orc cheerleaders for Blood Bowl are some of the funnest models Games Workshop's ever released, with their big dangly boobs and the anger and aggression, and the dresses kind of half falling off, poorly sewn. They're brilliant. Do you like these, Matt?
Yeah. I've always liked these. I remember, I thought they were slightly different. They used to have some on the Forge World website, and they always used to catch my eye because they were just fun. Maybe they were the same models. I'm not sure, but yeah, they always caught my fun. They always caught my eye, and they're such an integral part of the game when you do play the game. It's just fun. Yeah, it's great. They take no part on the pitch, but they do have influence on the pitch. So why not have some silly models to represent them?
Yeah, they're brilliant. And the Dark Elf ones are really cool. Like one of them's got a head held by the hair rather than a pom-pom. And then the standard human team ones just look like normal cheerleaders. But you're right, they have absolutely no effect on, like, you don't move them around during the game. They literally just stand on the side of the pitch. But it's so much more fun when you play someone at Blood Bowl if they've got a model representing these. Or the coaches, that's another thing, where people have a coach sat on the side.
Yeah.
It's just thematic, and I think these are great. If I collected 40k orcs, I'd just buy these to have a couple in a random ones in a squad.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because there's no female 40k orcs that I can think of, that I'm aware of. We'll make a weird boy out of one of these. I might be crossing some lines, but yeah, that'd be great if you made a female orc cheerleader weird boy. If you're an orc player and you're out there, get on it. Send us a picture. Rolling in my 6-4. Well, chop up your local library card and get down to the Black Library where all the best books are, because it's the Black Library preview that we're looking at now, the last piece of news for today. I don't know if you saw any of this, Matt. I know you're not quite as into the books as I am, but I've picked out some of the key things I thought might be interesting. There's a new book about Morven Val called The Spear of Faith by Jude Reed, which is interesting to have a High Lord of Terror book out in 40k.
Yeah.
We might learn more about the role of the High Lords currently. Like, we know loads about Malcador and some of the others that are involved in the Horus heresy, but not very much about High Lords of Terror these days. So I thought that might be cool, different take. And I've not read any of the sisters' books, so I might give that a go. But most interesting to me of the things they previewed, I don't know if you saw this, they're going to be releasing Art of the Horus Heresy, like coffee table book of all of the best art pieces based on the Horus Heresy.
Yeah, so I wondered if they were going to do this, because they did this, must almost literally be 20 years ago. I've got a PDF of it on my computer, on my hard drive. I haven't looked at it in so many years, where they did this with it was before even the first Horus Heresy book came out, which I think was in 2005. And they had a big coffee table art book. So obviously the art was very old. You had all of the old John Blanche stuff, etc. And I have wondered whether they would do this. So this doesn't come as a surprise. Yeah, I think this would be quite popular. It's definitely going to sell out.
Yeah, I will try and pick one of these up, but I've got a horrible feeling it's going to be one of those things that disappears almost instantly. And then they also released a model. So do you remember this time last year was when they released Gaunt's Ghosts and everyone went mad because we weren't expecting a model at the Black Library preview. Well, they've released the model at this year's Black Library preview, which is based on this Bad Moons boss called Uthak Blackhawk, who's stars in his own series called Brutal Cunning by Mike Brooks. I don't know what this orc is. I know nothing about him. I've not read the books, but I think it's a really cool model.
Yeah.
Big, nasty Bad Moon orc he looks like he's got a squig just for supporting his big, heavy gun, because it's a little bit heavy to wield one-handed.
This was today, wasn't it? The preview. Yeah, I saw the email. This caught my eye. I thought it was pretty cool. I think it has sort of shades of the sort of weird cartoony, not fantasy, but Age of Sigmar sort of elements in it. That was my first thought when I saw the picture this morning, or whenever I got the email. But I think the design of it's quite cool. And yeah, as you say, the gun leaning on the squig is quite a nice little touch. There's funny little details in the metalwork and the way that the gun is sort of strapped to the squig.
It's particularly orky, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I like the fact you can tell it's quite high tech for an orc. There's lots of glowing blue stuff, which I guess is right in line with the Bad Moons, because they're the snazzy ones, right? They've got lots of yellow. I think if you look in his mouth, aren't the Bad Moons the ones that have got excess teeth, which is why they've got so much money?
Oh, right.
Teeth are the currency.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
they've actually sculpted in some big teeth on him,
He
which
has
I
got
think is
quite a
quite
few
cool
notches.
touch,
Yeah.
if I've got that lore right.
Welcome to the Birmingham Motor Museum, the finest collection of Imperial and Xenos vehicles of any feral world in the galaxy. At the request of the local administratum, you are being recorded at all times. We wish you a pleasant visit. May the Emperor protect.
Oh, this looks great. Look at that. There's oil and grease on the floor. It must be in my dream museum. Oh, it smells like paint and it smells like machinery. Oh, I love
absolutely. I can already feel the WD-40
Grease.
getting inside my brain and making me feel better about the world.
Yeah.
Should we check out the first exhibit?
Yeah.
It says personal transports this way.
Let's do it.
Oh, Matt, look over here. It's an original Shining Spear Eldar jet bike. I know you love the Eldar.
Oh, I can smell it already. It disgusts me.
I'm sorry there's not much grease or tires or anything on this for you, but it does seem to be interesting. It says that it's used throughout all of the Eldar, including the Dark Eldar and the clowny Harlequin boys. It's obviously anti-grav, and apparently it's too fast for a human or even a space marine to ride. You require Eldar senses to actually be able to ride this. And their senses are so connected to the bike over time because the handlebars have got psychotropic crystal inside the handlebars. So they either put their bare hands on the handlebars or they have some kind of fancy ass gauntlets created that have got the psychotropic crystals in the gauntlet. So their like mind is physically connected to the bike. To do some maneuvers, apparently they don't even have to move their bodies. They just kind of tell the bike what to do and it reacts, which is pretty cool. They're designed for going kind of along flat ground, but they can go up and do dives, but they're fastest in a kind of straight line. And they attune, the actual bike attunes to the Eldar that rides it over time. So it's not just the fact they kind of psychically turn it on, they actually meld with it. I guess in a similar way to connect into the machine spirit, which I thought was kind of interesting when I was looking at this stuff. Like, it seems very heretical from an Imperial standpoint that an alien is driving a bike with his mind, but essentially Imperial Knights are kind of doing the same thing, and Titan engines even more so.
Yeah, I keep thinking about Iron Within, the show on Warhammer Plus, the one-off 25-minute show, because there were some great elements in the first 5 minutes where you see these jet bikes in sort of in real form, if you like, flying around with the Dark Eldar on top. And I remember the first time I saw that, it was pretty cool. You see how fast they are in that, and when he sort of flips upside
they do like
down.
A corkscrew, don't they? Like, carry on going.
It's really, really cool, and so close to the ground. In a way, they are classic 40k models because every Eldar army has them. They're such a core element of the Eldar army.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been around for such a long time. I mean, those original ones are core kits from way back when. And they've been redone recently as well. I think is it the Aleatok Rangers, the red bikes with the Rangers on, that got a kit released just this year.
Yeah.
A really nice update for some of these. I also think they're great from a paint perspective. If I ever actually teach myself to use an airbrush properly, I can't think of a better kit to do some cool stuff on those nice, big, smooth.
Yeah, you do see people
really
do stuff.
yourself.
Yeah, and like with templates and stuff over the top. Yeah.
But it says this particular example has an energy field built into the nose. So apparently some of the Exarchs that ride these can upgrade them, and they have energy fields which disrupt defenses. So by the sounds of things, they can literally ride these jet bikes through walls. So as the nose gets like close to the wall, it kind of disperses the wall around the bike and they can phase through it, which is really cool. Not only are you going faster than anyone can even see, but you're just driving straight through things that are designed to stop you, which again, super Eldari, super pacey and super cool.
Broke boys don't deserve no pussy. I know that's right.
What have you found over there, Matt?
It's a crazy contraption. It's a penitent engine. This is like
weird
polar.
Weird that they've classed this under personal transport, isn't it?
Polar opposite of a jet bike. This is not sleek, it's not smooth, and it's certainly not clean. Yeah, I mean, this takes I mean, this really takes the biscuit. This does. It's a bipedal combat walker used by the ecclesiarchy of the Imperium as a form of punishment to heretics. And it's their duty to repent their sins against the God Emperor by being strapped into a penitent engine. So it's sort of a cross between a robot and a torture device.
Yeah. And is it like, haven't I read somewhere that like some of its power is derived from the suffering of the pennant that's in it?
They're used by the Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Sororitas, as a heavy infantry fire support and close combat weapon. The repentant is strapped in, is hardwired into the front of the war engine, so you see them dangling in front of the machine itself, fully exposed to enemy attack, relying on the Emperor's judgment to keep them safe. As they are hardwired in, they have optic neural connectors, chemical injectors implanted into their brain and their spine. So willingness for forgiveness and wanting to be forgiven for their sins against the Emperor sort of helps power the machine forward. And they're so driven by wanting to repent and clean their soul that drives this machine forward. They're basically only good for close fire support and close combat, because the people strapped in them just want to get stuck in and they just go a bit berserk, really.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
So
it does
just
get them
drugs.
from A to B, so personal transport.
It certainly does.
Right, moving on to another bike then, Matt. This is a weird looking thing. It looks like it's got its wheels turned like horizontal, completely wrong way around. Looks like it wouldn't go anywhere. What is this?
Oh, so this is a Votan thing.
Oh, yeah. It's got the little funny dwarf symbol on it. It says here on the information card.
Space dwarfs.
This is a pale imitation of the jet bikes used by the Imperium and the Eldar, and it certainly looks like it, doesn't it? Doesn't look like it'd be able to go anywhere.
You don't read that often, do you? A pale imitation of something used by the Imperium.
Yeah, that's true. Apparently, it's got some quite good tech in it, but I'm just trying to read the rest of the information. It's all kind of squiggled out. It's got a little tag next to it, and it says "Little Baz Necromunda Squat." And he's stuck a little bit of sticker over the image of this Magna Coil bike, and I can see from this picture that it's a picture of like a load of tiny squats in leathers, and it says these are way better. And these do look better, because this is a squad of 7 bikers riding what can only be described as Harley Davidson trikes.
Yeah, so these are wheel based, not floating based.
Yeah, I think little Baz might work in kind of the workshop here at the museum, and
yeah, volunteer.
He's covered this up. He doesn't like any of the new Votan stuff by the looks of things, and he wants to talk about the old school squat trikes, and who doesn't? Because those were classic lead models where I think like the front wheel was attached to the handlebars, and then everything else on the bike was one solid chunk of lead. But they were proper low riders, and the squats had the like leather jackets and the biker glasses, and those were really cool. I was so excited when we knew we were getting new squats and Votan to pick up some squat bikes, and then these Magna Coil bikes came out, and they were just completely opposite to what I wanted. So I went online and started trying to buy the pieces of the old bikes, but because they're these two completely different chunks, I could never find the individual pieces. So I've got 2 or 3 front bits and no rear bit currently. So I'm keeping an eye on eBay to build some of these. But the cool thing from those, other than the aesthetic of like a real biker gang, was that you used to be able to take a Doom Lance. So your leader of the like biker pack could take a Doom Lance, and it was really similar to what the Rough Riders have, but it was like a spear. And when the spear contacted the enemy, it fired a bolt gun shell, but not like from a bolt gun attached to the spear like the Custodian Guard have. It fired the shell like down the entire like shaft of the spear and out the end,
Right.
which was like proper cool old school 40k. So I'm not surprised old little Barry has scribbled all over this Magna Coil exhibit and informed us about something from a little while ago. But yeah, if you've never seen a squat trike or a squat bike, check them out. Okay, that seems to be the end of this little personal transport exhibit. Should we move on?
Yep. Oh God, these look tiny. These are really boring and uninteresting. Can we just move to the next bit?
No, Matt, we've paid our money to get in. We've got to look at all of these things. Look, there's some more Eldar stuff over here. You know you love Eldar. Look, it's a Venom, a Dark Eldar Venom.
Oh, it's just another jet bike.
No, this is more than just a jet bike. You can fit like more than one person on it. It's like a kind of batwing shaped. It reminds me of Batman. It's great. It's small. It's anti-grav. Apparently, it's favored by the leaders of the Dark Eldar because the leaders found that if they sat on some of the larger ships, like the Ravagers or the Raiders, the ships tend to get blown up quite quickly. But if they went into battle on one of these, it was almost like a personal chariot where they could just have themselves or a couple of bodyguards. And they often have this really cool thing called a flicker field, which is what they can switch on that makes it look like the bike is darting in and out of reality. So you can't actually see it coming. So as if all of these Eldar jet bikes weren't fast enough already, even if you could perceive this one, it would look like it was jumping in and out of reality. So there'd be no way to target it, which is really, really cool. And they can even go into the webway. I know you've always wanted to get into the webway. If you're really skilled, it says that you can go down a corridor designed for just one person. If you're on one of these, you kind of sit down and turn it sideways, Millennium Falcon style.
Sweet. Yeah. I have always found these quite cool models. I mean, there's something like jet fightery about them. There's not a whole lot of a leap from an Airfix kit really to this. No. I've always quite liked the idea of the people riding on the back and riding on the wings and stuff. I've always sort of looked at them and thought, knowing Games Workshop, I imagined the kit to be like pretty hard to assemble and pretty gappy. And that's always kind of put me off. I have built some Dark Eldar stuff when it came in that 3rd edition box set, I think, a long time ago, and I got very sick of putting spikes into my fingers.
It's definitely one of the highest risk kits, anything Dark Eldar for sure.
Yeah.
But just the silhouette of these, I think, is particularly cool.
Yeah.
But for that same reason, I mean, it's why I don't have a Dark Eldar army. I don't want to stick all the tiny little sticks together.
Yeah.
It's just not something I'm into.
Yeah. Can we go and look at the bigger stuff now?
No. There's more Xenos in here, Matt. There's more Xenos. Look at this. It's a TX4 Piranha from the Tau Empire. So this is a fine example of Tau crafted vehicle. It was introduced in the 2nd Sphere expansion, and originally it didn't even have a role in warfare. They were used to transport dignitaries around. So this is the original like Tau Pope-mobile for getting your ethereals around. The way that it works is now is kind of like a scout vehicle. So the Pathfinders go forward, they fire a load of marker lights into something, and then very swiftly a couple of piranhas come up on the side and then use the marker lights to target and wipe out something quickly, and then the whole unit withdraws. So these are kind of stealth warfare. And I picked this as a Tau vehicle example for the episode because I like the way different factions have vehicles that play very, very similar roles. And we don't have time to do loads of Space Marine vehicles tonight. So I thought this was kind of a decent stand-in for a land speeder. Because it's that same kind of role of like a fast-moving...
Two crew.
You can put a gun on the front. They normally have burst cannons, I think, the Tower ones, but you can mix it up. I think you can get fusion blasters and stuff on them. But I like those little vehicles, and I like the hammer strikes and the storm speeders and the new stuff that you get in Space Marines. But I like that kind of small vehicle support that you can move up quickly in game, as well as having lumbering stuff I'm sure we'll get to later at the back.
I know you said it was like the Pope-mobile, but I'm in my mind, if anyone's familiar with like 2-man submersible torpedoes, the frogmen used to use in the Second World War, the Italians used them and then we used them, where you'd sit on these like big torpedoes essentially that would motorize 2 divers that would sit on the top. It's the same sort of thing. But then when you said the Pontmobile, it also reminded me of like a German, what do you call them? Like a bike, with the guy on the side with the sidecar.
Yeah.
It's
like
that sort of driving around in that, like, because that would have used, like, that would have been driven around commanders, or they would have had a little machine gun on it and they've gone around. It's that sort of role, but in the
it's also that it has that
army.
kind of like open top that you can imagine a Tau ethereal kind of waving like the Queen out.
Yeah.
Another cool thing about this model as well is I can't think of very many models where you could detach something from the model and move it round. There's a few things that fire stuff, like the Tyrannid Biovores, where you fire the spore mines, but the Piranha on the front wings has got the 2 gun drones.
Oh, that clip out.
Yeah, that you can like pop in and out, and you're not supposed to glue in, and can kind of move around to their own function. I don't know if they still can in codexes, but at some point they could. And that I thought was quite a cool dynamic that you just don't see very often. You can get troops in and out, but this is kind of almost part of the vehicle that becomes independent, which I used to enjoy.
Yeah. And very modern in terms of warfare. But I remember, I mean, we only last episode we were talking about the Tauros or whatever it was called that came from the Elysian drop troopers, and that there'd been recently some models that had gone from Forge World into Games Workshop. And I remember the Piranha model started life as a resin model in Forge World.
Did it?
I'm 95% sure that I've remembered this correctly.
There's a very similar model to the Piranha that everyone's using now called a Tetra, which is like super good in game, where they sit slightly under a canopy. It looks very similar.
I'm sure the Piranha started life in Forge World, and then it went over. It was thrown into a codex, and then they brought it out in plastic. Yeah.
Gone are those days. Now it's not called Forge World anymore. It's called Expert Resin Kits, which is way less fun.
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, thanks for humouring me on the small vehicles. Let's see if we can find something big around the corner.
Oh, yeah. All right, Welshy, look, come and check this out. Look at this. It's a drop pod. Oh, touch it. You can touch it. No one's looking. Touch it. Feel its smooth sides.
Leaned in. Oh, it's so smooth.
Yeah.
Look how those sides just flop down like a man in charge at a urinal.
Yeah, and it's used. Look, it's got orbital markings and heat signatures on the surface. It's been used.
Wow.
Yeah, it's almost like we're looking at an Apollo capsule in a museum, except there's millions of these drop pods.
Tell us what it does, though, Matt. For those that don't know, we're obviously big drop pod fans, but for those that don't know, tell the listener what it is.
I mean, I think this is one of the most iconic Warhammer vehicles. I would say it's one of the most iconic Warhammer vehicles. These are they're an atmospheric assault transport. That's the official title. They're primarily used by the Space Marines to deploy onto planetary surfaces or potentially asteroids, etc., from orbital spacecraft. So they get effectively shot out from a spacecraft, and they're used as a one-way armored landing craft to insert forces right into the heart of battle or deep behind enemy lines. So deep insertion into the rear of the enemy. Drop pods are fired with colossal acceleration, screaming through a planet's atmosphere with oversized rocket thrusters, boosting it even further beyond terminal velocity. Even the most advanced air defense systems have difficulty tracking onto a drop pod, traveling up to 12,000 kilometers per hour and only firing its retro thrusters at the last possible moment before making a devastating impact on the planetary surface. And would also crush any surface structures that it would meet when it landed. And then the doors, there's 5 doors on the drop pod, and they get they get blown. The bolts are blown, and the doors flop out. And there's various forms of drop pod. The most common one carries 10 men, 10 Space Marines. So in all of the, and this is why I think it's a very iconic vehicle, because in a lot of the film stuff that's produced and game stuff that's produced on Space Marines, which are the main protagonists of any of films and games, etc., there's always a drop pod in some point, and there's always the moment where the drop pod lands and the squad inside have basically already deployed. They're already holding their bolters, their chainswords. The bolts go on the doors and the squad come charging out. There's no sort of fiddling around with their guns. They're out the door.
So cinematic. It's like a full planetary drop pod assault.
Yeah.
Whether you're reading it in a book, whether you're looking at Space Marines coming out of one on one of the beautiful pictures in White Dwarf of a tabletop, or watching it on an animation, or listening to it on an audio drama. The thought of these essentially meteorites full of Space Marines smashing into the ground, blasting their doors, and everyone's got their guns raised, ready to come out. It's so atmospheric, and it's so 40k. There's no gentle lander. That comes later for sure, but we're firing men into a planet in a big old metal, it's like a flower, isn't it, the way it opens? Kind of petals open out, right?
It must help that they're mostly Space Marines that use them, but I've read that it's based on a similar Imperial lifeboat, an Imperial life pod. So the escape pods on starships, the design resembles that, but I imagine that the Space Marine physiology helps them deploy in a drop pod, because the G forces that the body must go through is insane. And
absolutely,
a Space Marine in power armor is way better dealing with that than a normal human.
It's also a prime example of a kit that you can paint very, very easily if you glue the door shut. But if you want it to be a fully functioning open door, it's one of the fiddliest kits in the world to get the 5 seats with their backs to each other, with the harnesses and the Space Marine sat inside it, and get all of that painted. It's hard work.
I've written in my notes here, remember the kit being particularly unfun to build. So we've both experienced that. It is. You definitely need to you need to think ahead of when you build this. You need to have the inside sort of half painted when you put in most of it together. And
you said it's not only for men either, right? Because there are different variations.
I remember. I don't know if Forge World still had them on the website, but I remember where you could buy them to have dreadnoughts inside, and you could buy them to have the auto turret. So it would the drop pod would come down, and there'd just be like a double barrel, a twin linked heavy bolter or something inside, rather than any humans. Which I always thought that was quite cool, because the Space Marine commander could be like, we need some more fire support over on that hill, and just deploy a load of pillboxes, essentially, like defensive line. And I think that militarily that makes so much sense.
I would have loved, we called it the Space Marine Playhouse, but the Hammerfall bunker is kind of like supposed to have a role similar to that. But why didn't they just redo the proper drop pod with the weapons inside it? That'd have been excellent.
I remember when the drop pod came out in plastic, because again, you could buy them on Forge World, but they brought out a plastic kit one, which was really cool. And it's quite a big kit when it came out, and people were using them in armies. I had one for my I got one for my Black Templars. The rules, they were powerful, because you could from memory you could deploy in turn 1, which you couldn't do if you were using any other thing. So drop pods were really powerful, and now they're just sort of, with Primaris, they're just sort of fallen out of favor, which I think is a shame, because they do have such a visual identity with the games and everything.
The other drop pod that I love, and if you've ever been lucky enough to go to Warhammer World, you'll have seen these all over the place on the massive board that they've got. But the Chaos Dreadclaw drop pods, that are drop pods that can kind of, they don't just go vertically, they boost their thrusters, and they've got essentially kind of clawed feet bottoms, so they can dig in at a kind of diagonal into a building side, clasp onto the building, and then blow forwards a hole in the wall of the building and release Chaos Space Marines into the building, which is, you know, if it wasn't atmospheric enough that these things are just hitting the ground, to have them latch onto buildings like ticks, disgorging chaos is even cooler.
And there's a couple in the side of the building, isn't there, in the display? Yeah, they are like ticks. And
I think they were definitely Forge World. Whether you can still get them as expert resin, I don't know. And the Dread drop pod, so iconic that they even released one for the Tyranids. We're not going to talk much about any Tyranid stuff today because we're focused on vehicles. But you've got the Tyrannocyte, which is essentially a Tyranid drop pod. Yeah, drop pod, iconic, absolute icon. And there looks to be another icon over here, Matt.
Oh yeah,
this is one of the if the drop pod is one of the hardest to put together, fiddliest, most annoying kits, I would rank this Necron vehicle up there with it. It's a Ghost Ark. So this is one of the oldest slabs of plastic that you can get for the Necrons. And it's the mobile fixing ship. So it looks a bit like, well, it doesn't look like anything. I think that's why I love it as a model. It has these kind of ribs. I guess it kind of looks a bit like a Viking boat, kind of topsy-turvy Viking boat with these kind of big ribs on the side. And then in the ribs, you've got loads of Necrons, all with their arms crossed in kind of stasis fields. And this is really a Necron troop transport that is able to disgorge troops across the board, but also fix up troops on the board. So Necrons reanimate, but sometimes even a Necron struggles to reanimate and get itself back up. And the Ghost Arks are able to fly over there, or float over there. I imagine them kind of floating up and down, and release a kind of container of Canoptex scarabs that kind of scuttle down and help the Necron that's broken up into the Ghost Ark, where they can properly fix it up and put it straight back on the board. So if reanimating Metal Men of Doom wasn't enough for you, there's also a vehicle around that will help even the most broken ones get back up. But I also read they can be so broken that even the Ghost Ark can't do very much. And in that instance, the Ghost Ark is able to completely dismantle the Necron and use all of its parts and its energy, recycle its energy back into the forces around it. So if there's more Necron that kind of need charging up, it can take the kind of power cell from a Necron and put it in another one. So it's kind of like a field ambulance and a troop deployment vehicle at the same time. I've always loved, but it is so fiddly to put together, not only because you've got to get a whole rack of 10 Necrons who are in separate Necron pieces in the middle, but then you've also got to stick the flare arrays down the side, so it has kind of port and starboard guns down the side poking out.
I've always loved on these models the guy that's at the back, that's kind of like the commander. I know when they previewed the Silent King, they had the cartoon of like hieroglyphics appearing, and on there they had them, because they do resemble the Egyptian oared ships or boats that they'd use on the Nile. And that you'd have in the hieroglyphics.
They're just talking about Vikings. They're clearly Egyptian.
Yeah, and that guy that sat on the back of the model, I think you've got one where he's pointing, and it just is so. It's so. It's a great model, because you can see where that inspiration has come from.
He has a little,
I imagine
cockpit.
It's quite
it looks
hard
like
to
a DJ
build.
where he's got loads of buttons in front of him, and the detailing on some of the Necron kits is just really cool. Like everything else has a flat screen, but the Necrons have these kind of spherical orbs that they're looking at beneath them, which is great. So yeah, I've always loved the model and kind of the role of it in 40k, but what I didn't know was the history behind it. So I was reading up like what the actual lore behind this model was. And this kind of shape goes all the way back to the time of the early Necron tier, before the Necron tier
Oh,
had
cool.
even
When they were
developed,
living.
like when they were not only when they were living, but like their own early history, where
Okay.
these were wooden carts that were built
Oh,
in this
great.
shape, that were pulled by the beasts of the time. So really harking back to the kind of Tomb King aesthetic. And the wooden carts were pulled by beasts, and they would go out onto the battlefield to pick up the dead. So if the dead got too much, the dead would get slung into these wooden carts that were shaped like this and dragged away. A full kind of bring out your dead moment. And then as the Necron tier as a race developed and became mechanized, they made mechanized versions of these kind of Ghost Ark carts. And they used them to go and collect people for biotransference. So when the Necron tier decided they were going to go from being humans with souls to robots in order to stop their bodies degenerating, they would send the Ghost Arks out, and the Ghost Arks would collect people and take them to the halls of biotransference. And over time, people began to twig that perhaps that wasn't the best decision. People started noticing that the Ghost Ark carts were being driven by Necrons and not Necron tier, so they'd installed the robots in the back. And it became more of a kind of forceful endeavor of people getting shoved into the Ghost Arks and carted away to be turned into Necrons. And then people started revolting, but there were already so many Necrons at that time that they realized you didn't really need to be very alive to be converted to a Necron. So there'd also be some Necrons on the cards who would just batter people to near death, throw their like comatose carcass onto the Ghost Ark, and then carry it away. So these things had like a full role in the Necron history before the role on the battlefield that we see today. And they still apparently can inspire a kind of weird leftover emotion in some Necrons. Like they kind of feel a bit odd when they come by because there's this kind of historic memory of negativity associated with them. But I thought that was really cool. There's this whole history behind the development of the vehicle right back to when Necrons were actual people. So that's why I selected it as a troop transport for today's episode.
That's interesting. I was trying to think if I could think of anything else that Games Workshop have, like Xenos stuff, where they've written that in. That's nice that they've attached that in the lore, the design lineage, because that makes sense. I mean, that's how stuff works. That's quite nice. And the fact that the arc itself now is healing wounded troops on the battlefield. It's like it's always had that association with picking people up and
cutting away the dead and fixing those that are about to die.
But let me show you this next door. I don't know if it's as cool as this. This is a giant earth-eating transport. Why fly when you can bury yourself under the ground in a termite drill? Look at this. Look at the gears on the front of this mouth.
Very cool.
Yes, so this is a termite assault drill. It's an Imperial subterranean vehicle, mostly utilized by the AdMech. It's the smallest of the AdMech's tunneling vehicles. So they have some larger ones. And it uses a phase field generator, as well as a ring of melter cutters and a huge heavy bore drill to burrow through the ground. So it's got like three systems working in concert to essentially eat the earth in front of it and spit it out behind. It's like the tunneling machines you see now in heavy engineering works, except these operate very, very quickly. So the melter cutters are literally melter guns. So they have a ring on the model going around the mouth of the circumference, and they would blast in front of the vehicle as it drives under the ground. It's like that film. What's the film?
The Core.
Yeah, the Core.
Man, I love the Core.
But on a slightly smaller scale. We're not going to the center of the planet. We're going potentially like a couple of miles. So the idea of these is to burrow burrow under defense systems and surprise the enemy, kind of like the drop pod. It's the Space Marine drop pod, but reversed, literally, because it's going through the ground. But actually, the design originates from Terra, and it was mostly used it was developed to burrow out Xenos species. And the first patterns were actually created sometime in the 30th millennium during the Unification Wars. So that's quite interesting. It's not necessarily, I mean, maybe it still is, but it isn't necessarily tied in with the AdMech or the Mechanicum as they were then. It's potentially a Terran design, but they were first used by the Salamanders Legion during the Unification Wars, and they were found to be, although developed to help fight some Xenos species that were in the ground, they were actually found to be very useful for sieges because you could just circumnavigate,
just burrow under,
yeah,
the walls. That's one of my favorite bits of grimdark lore from 30k, from the Siege of Terra, where the Sons of Horus attempt to burrow into the palace, and Dawn realizes this is happening and employs Arkan Land to do something about it. And Arkan Land fills the holes that they're burrowing with liquid plascrete, which solidifies in the grinding gears of these things, and literally just entombs these Space Marines trapped, possibly still alive now. I don't know how long a Space Marine can actually live for, but it's real hideous, grim dark. Like, the plascrete starts getting in, one of them cracks and it starts getting in the holes, and they're drowning alive in plascrete. Cool. And then because they're encased in their armor, they're still alive, completely immobilized. But yeah, for sieges, these are great, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking that's a brilliant anti-Space Marine weapon. Concrete.
Yeah.
super fast drying concrete. Yeah, just pour that and then they're trapped in their armor. Yeah, I mean well, now it's mostly used by the AdMech. So it's kind of, I don't know why, I don't know where it left the battle halls or the armories of Space Marines and entered the Skitarii. So they're used by the Skitarii similarly to a drop pod. 10-man squad will be inside. It will come up from the ground, and then the 10-man squad can deploy. And they
use these a lot in games as well, like in 9th edition. Like
in 9th edition,
you've got the Forged World versions of
no. I've got the knockoff versions.
Ooh.
The termite drill, I mean, it's a lovely model from Forge World, but it's really quite expensive for transport. So yeah, there was at the beginning of 9th edition, they were really, really powerful. And at the time, the AdMech had no transports.
Yeah.
So actually that it wasn't that they were powerful. It was the only transport option. And then when we started playing them against your big monsters, we found that actually, if you could get a termite drill into close combat, the gears will just keep grinding at a monster or something with loads of wounds. It could, if you rolled lucky, it could be really powerful.
Yeah.
Because they have weapons on them as well. So the troops come out, and then there's some weapons on the termite that will start shooting off and firing everything. But I think they have, like the larger tunneling vehicles, they are deployed from another vehicle. So they're on like a trailer, and then they'll be sort of angled up like the mole from Thunderbirds.
There's also a squat mole based in the same.
Oh yes,
same
there
thing
is. Yeah, there's like epic models, isn't there? Yeah. So tunnelers are like a weird subgenre of 40k vehicles. Like, they are quite popular.
It shows, like, I think the dynamics of 40k as a tabletop game, that of the 3 troop transports we've picked to talk about, there are millions more, like honorable mentions to Land Raiders, obviously Rhinos, obviously the Sisters of Silence one that opens up is really cool. But the fact that we've picked 3 things to talk about, one of which assaults from the sky, one of which delivers and fixes troops in a manner very similar today, yet is owned by Terminator men, and one that erupts from the ground, yet you're playing this on a tabletop rolling dice, but you can imagine all of these things happening, and they have rules that allow you to envision this happening and make it happen on the board in a way that I think is really quite lifelike to how you picture it happening in your mind. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
So Matt, it says new exhibit round the corner. Do you want to go back in time?
Yes, I do. Let's go.
The 70s.
The 80s. The 90s.
Oh, we're going back in time.
Is that a space squat?
It's time we take you back with a
Blast from the past.
Whoa, this tunnel seems to have taken us outside, Matt.
Yes, like any good museum, there is an outside section because this thing is so big. Look at that. It's an Imperial Guard Leviathan. It's a gigantic mobile army group command center for coordinating the vast numbers of troops and vehicles found in Imperial Guard regiments. Look at it.
Wow.
It's standing over 90 meters tall. The Leviathan has cargo room to hold 2 full companies of guardsmen.
Wow.
Plus, it's got a rear deck landing pad for Imperial transport craft, such as a Valkyrie.
Wow. So this thing we're looking at is a model, quite simply epic proportions. I can see a Bane blade in the background of the picture we're looking at. This is, what, 2 Bane blades long and almost 2 Bane blades wide at the base of the tracks?
Yeah, something like that.
And then a few stories high.
So it's a popular... Well, it's sort of a vaguely popular kit that people make. And yeah, there was an epic model, and there's been some rules for it in previous editions of Warhammer. It's sort of a weird vehicle because I read that it's the squats also used to use them. So I don't know if this links in with epic, but squats use them as transports. Yeah. So maybe they just had the same kit.
Is it a
something
Forge
like that.
World kit? Or
No,
is this something people kit bash and make
no,
themselves?
this is people kit bash, yeah. Although weirdly, and I've forgotten this until now because I wanted to bring this up in an episode not that long ago, but in the last 2 months, I had a dream where I had like a wrapped up present, like a big box, and I opened it, and it was a Games Workshop kit of this model, and I just remember getting really excited.
Aside from being on massive tracks, at the front it's got what they've called a Doomsday cannon, which is interesting because that's also a Necron gun. But this is reminds me of the Vindicator gun, big, wide-barreled but very stubby anti-fortification cannon. Yeah,
which I've always thought would be a weird thing to put on a command transport, but it's a massive ballistic auto weapon called a macro cannon. Though, as you say, it's also known as the Doomsday Cannon. The macro cannon is said to be big enough to fit a Lehman Russ main battle tank inside the barrel.
Wow. So in your dream, did this have a fleshlight adaptation or something?
Oh, man. Yes, it did. How on earth you would reload that gun inside that tank, we don't need to go into. It's still really cool.
Magic.
It's a giant thing, and there is. I'm sure there's some older Black Library books where people go in. It must be in a Gaunt's Ghost, I don't know, but where they end up going into one of these vehicles because they are like a command center. It's like a moving command bunker. If you think of like a war room.
It's got that Gothic styling to it as well. It looks a lot like a cross between a concrete bunker and a church on top of some massive tank tracks.
Yeah.
It's got 6 las cannons down each side. Yeah, it's a really cool, very 40k piece of kit.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see it again with the small scale game that's coming out.
If you're listening on Spotify, have a quick Google of a Leviathan Regimental HQ, and I'm sure you'll find it. Wonderful stuff. Right, should we head back inside?
Yeah, back out of the rain. I'm just looking at the museum map. Isn't it weird that there's no orc vehicles in here? Maybe they fell apart.
Please will guests refrain from any mention of the Green Xenos menace. Previous incarnations of this Motor Museum franchise have been targeted by orc hordes led by big mechs attempting to pillage our exhibits. We thank you for your consideration in avoiding triggering any of our staff.
Oh, geez, I guess that's true, Matt. They'd probably just raid museum like this anyway.
This is probably the second museum or the third one. The other versions have all been trashed.
Yeah, I reckon so. It's probably why they have to move so often.
Yeah.
Right, what's the next exhibit? Says here on the map, Stellar Chassis. Some of the best chassis in the galaxy. Right, let's check it out.
Ah, look at this beauty. I have never been that fond of Space Marine tanks, but this Predator Annihilator is a beautiful armored vehicle. Look at those twin turret mounted Stormbringer las cannons on the turret and its las cannons on the sponsons. Look at that. 4 las cannons on a tank. It's so 40k beautiful.
Yeah, I absolutely love this tank. It's the perfect anti-tank tank of the old Space Marine range. You can imagine those sponsons and that turret just working independently, shooting in all directions. When you used to play, when there used to be firing arcs in the good old days, you know, you were so grateful to have the option of a full turret and also sponson mounted weapons that, you know, you'd be foolish not to have one of these in your army that could fire essentially in all directions.
Yeah. I love the look of las cannons. I was talking to Jeff the other day about my las cannon heavy weapons teams that I've got quite a few of in the guard army, because I just think that las cannons just look really, really pretty. And this tank, I've got my old Templar one I made one of the twin linked turret las cannons to be longer, so that's sort of asymmetrical, that I thought looked quite cool. And every time I see it back at home on the shelf, I just think it looks, there's like something sort of silently menacing about it, because there's no like big black powder with those las cannons. There's all just laser weapons, and they're just so cool. And as you say, with the armor values, the guard tanks would have higher armor, but their sponsons only had a 90-degree firing arc. So and you could only put 1 las cannon on a Lehman Russ. So this tank with 4, 2 of which is on a 360-degree turret, and the sponsons were 180-degree. Your firing arcs on this tank, although slightly less well armored, was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They look so cool. Yeah,
they did. Everything was in proportion, and there was nothing over the top on it. Absolutely iconic, that silhouette.
What I didn't realize was that actually it's a relatively new addition to the Imperium of Man's armory. It was introduced in the 36th millennium as a dedicated tank killer, and it was actually originally conceived as a field modification by the Space Wolves chapter.
Right, okay.
And 200 years of research was then enacted and finally confirmed that it was actually part of the original STC pack of a Rhino Predator, and it was therefore universally adopted. So it's only relatively recently that it was added, and its las cannons feature flash dampeners, which I think all las cannons have. That's the funny angle that they have at the front. Special focusing
rings.
Why
they've got that little diagonal on the end? That's to stop the flash.
That is, that's what I've always understood. That thing on all of the las weapons is that because I think you can get that on, or people put that on some modern weapons. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, its cannons have special focusing rings as well, and they are powered by a diquartzoid crystal battery for maximum efficiency. So maybe the las cannons on these Space Marine tanks, they could be superior, or they might have more efficiency than a las cannon on a guard tank. Who knows? Each of the tank's 2 barrels are good for about 1,000 shots before the effects of heat warping require them to be replaced. So the tech, you have to call the tech marine then.
So yeah, I mean, I love the Predator and Annihilator and the Predator. They're both such iconic looking tanks, but they're iconic because they're based on that Rhino chassis, which I guess is why they're in this exhibit. And Rhino, if you didn't know, stands for RH1-N0 Tracked Exploration and Multi-Purpose Defense Vehicle. So that's that kind of classic chassis. And I guess the reason it looks so classic is because we know that chassis almost exactly from real life. It's a chassis based on very similar to an American armored personnel carrier used in Vietnam War, right?
Yeah, that's what I've always thought it to be, which is the one that's in Warhammer World when everyone has their selfie with the Ultramarines Rhino.
Yeah, that's right. If you've ever been to Warhammer World, it's an adapted version of one of those they've got parked outside. But the Rhino chassis is classic, and it's very dear to my heart at the moment because I've finally got to the point where I've run out of space in my house for displaying models. So I had to put some models under the bed for the first time in a big box. And I retired all of my Rhino chassis recently. And that was a lot because the Rhino chassis is your Rhino personnel carrier. I had some Whirlwinds, so that's your missile platform for the Space Marines. Razorback, which was your carrier with a bit more firepower. You've got essentially the same chassis for the Vindicator, which has got the massive anti-fortification gun on the front. You can put the Dozer blade on that. Then again, pretty much the same chassis, although it was a bit updated for the Hunter and the Stalker, which are your anti-fly firepower tanks. So it is a real iconic shape, that Rhino shape.
And let's not forget, well, actually, where it's still used in the latest kits for the Sisters of Battle, you've got various other things, the transports and armored transports similar to the Razorback. Yeah, and their heavy fire
and for
supports.
Chaos. If you're a Chaos
and for
player,
Chaos,
you're still running these. I mean,
I
was tempted when I put these under the bed. Do I keep them for fun old school games where I play Mini Marines, or do I just spray them all pink and put them in my Emperor's Children army? But yeah, absolute classic. And I also love how some of the design elements from the Rhino have been carried over. They're kind of that recessed front panel is on almost all of the new Primaris tanks, which kind of harks back to that chassis. But yeah, a very, very useful STC in the Imperium for sure.
Rolling in my 6-4.
Oh, Matt, look, some more Xenos.
Oh, no.
Come look at this. Come look at this. It's an Eldar tank.
Oh, no. How do the Eldar tanks, like, we're in a museum. So most museums, you go around like a tank museum or an aeroplane museum, and they're sat on their wheel bogies or they're sat on their tracks leaking oil into trays. But how do the anti-grav stuff, I mean, are they on like a stand? Are they like a big model stand, or do they gravity field still run?
They're on a big plastic stand with a big clear plastic base underneath.
What, a dodgy Games Workshop clear stand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't touch the tank, you'll break the stand.
So Matt, this is an Aeldari Falcon, and its name is based on Thralchu, the consort of the Great Hawk in the War on Heaven. Now, he went to get a sword from Vol, enabling Eldresh to live on and fight and carry on.
Welshy, I don't give a shit. How fast does it go?
Oh, well, I thought you were getting into the Eldar lore, but maybe not. It goes 800 kilometers per hour.
What? Oh, that is ridiculous. This isn't a tank.
It goes 800 kilometers per hour, and its grav engines can allow it to soar above the battlefield and above any other tanks. So if you've got Imperial artillery at tank level, this thing's just going to float up, fire its thrusters and fly above.
So just to so this is the main tank of the Eldar.
Yeah, so this is
the equivalent
Stellar chassis. This is the equivalent of the
a Lehman Russ.
chassis.
So a Lehman Russ, I know this. A Lehman Russ does 65 kilometers an hour.
There's a big difference there.
So
I did just get 800 kilometers per hour from Wikipedia, so maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but they do move quite speedily in the game. But you're right, this is very similar to a Russ in that it has a chassis to which you can fit all kinds of things. There's different variations. You can have a firestorm, a fire prism, a night spinner, a wave serpent. These are all based on the same Falcon chassis idea, which again it may not be the thing that we like, but it is a very iconic shape on a Warhammer 40k.
Oh yeah. The
years gone by.
I've always quite liked the fire prism weapon itself, and the way people paint them is quite cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That gun that you can have on the fire prism, I was looking up earlier because a lot of the Eldar guns are very similar to the Imperium guns. They just work better, but they're based on similar technology. So you can have a pulse laser, which is a bit like a multi-laser, or you can have a bright lance, which is a bit like a las cannon, or you can have a fire prism, which is the thing that the Imperium hasn't worked out how to do. And that's where they essentially fire laser into a crystal, and the crystal focuses the laser into a single, more defined point, and then fires that laser out the end, which is why the fire prism turret is so good. But yeah, I love that kind of crystal shape that you get on there. The night spinners have a really cool weapon. They've got something called a twin-linked Doom Weaver, which is one of those guns that fires monomolecular webbing. So it fires like webs that just shred everything in their path, a bit like Cyrax from Mortal Kombat. And the Wave Serpent just has a cool name. But you can also fit them with stuff that isn't gun related. They can have star and vector engines. So star engines make them even faster, and vector engines mean they can turn on a much sharper angle. But the coolest thing you can fit with them is a thing called a hollow field. And the hollow field means when they're completely still, they're invisible. So they project everything from behind them forwards. So remember, people were trying to make coats like that in real life at some point. So you can't target them because nothing can sense that they're there. Apparently it works on all specs and everything as well. And then when they move,
try and do that with tanks now.
But what they don't do with tanks now that these have is when it does then move, it creates an effect that looks like space around it has like shattered into a million crystal pieces. So as it's moving forward, it's like looking down a kaleidoscope. So nothing can actually work out where it is.
There's a Bretonian game that White Dwarf made called Full Tilt, I think it's called.
How have you managed to turn the Eldar Falcon chassis into a comment on Bretonians?
Well, because in the White Dwarf, there is a Bretonian game where you joust different knights and you can have a jousting tournament.
Yeah.
It seems quite fun, but I have the White Dwarf. We'll play it one day. But in the same White Dwarf from 1997, I believe, is a section on how they designed and made the Falcon kit, which was new. And it's really interesting how there's pictures, and it's Jez Goodwin is the designer, but there's like the tool makers in there, and it's showing them the process of how they made like a bigger scale model, like a 50% bigger model of it to like do all the design cues.
And then there's all of them for a kit of its time.
Yeah.
Think some of the Tau kits came out later.
Yeah.
This is so sleek, and the curves on the side of it
still
so
selling
sharp.
it. Well, it'd be remiss of me not to mention the Lehman Russ at this point, because although there isn't one here in this museum, because they're in demand more than ever, they are, I don't know whether they're iconic, because some of those other vehicles we've spoken about today are slightly more iconic. The silhouettes are maybe more iconic, but the Lehman Russ is like the main armored vehicle of the Imperium, essentially. And there are, like, I don't know, on the top of my head, 20 variants. I mean, even the kit now comes with like 9 or 10, and then there's all the others that you can get from Forge World, or used to be able to get from Forge World. And they're really random stuff. I did want to mention the Atlas recovery tank, which is really hard to get on eBay. It was a Forge World kit. It's basically a Lehman Russ chassis that's got a crane out the back. So it is a tank that would be used in an armored company to recover damaged tanks or to do field repairs during operations. And they didn't sell it for very long, but it's sort of like gained a cult status.
Have you got one?
No. When I was younger, it always seemed like a poor use of financial resources to buy a tank with a crane on it. But now looking back, I kind of wish I had, because they are like, they have achieved cult status in like armored company collectors because they are so rare to get hold of.
No, that's cool. I didn't know they existed.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I play Russes because I've got a Gene Stealer cult army as well, and it is glorious to have a kit. I know the kit doesn't come with every single variation in it, but it's great fun to go to a codex and just be able to switch out the gun and have a model that does a completely different role. I mean, the armor stays the same, the movement value stays the same, but switching between guns on a Lehman Russ makes it a completely different model, whether you're one dice rolling to one-shot a repulsor with a vanquisher, or whether you're blasting stuff with a Gatling cannon. It is a wonderful tank, and I think that it is iconic in 40k. I think that shape is iconic, and again, I think it hits home with a lot of people because it's so similar to tanks of the real world.
I did want to give a shout out to when the Space Wolves used to have the Lehman Russ in their army list, so you could have a Space Wolf army with grey Lehman Russes, which makes sense because it's named after their Primarch, which is just kind of a shame that you couldn't do now, because that'd be quite funny. How many Primaris Marines can you fit in a Lehman Russ? But yeah, classic tank.
Absolutely. Let's crawl on down the corridor to the next section.
Yeah, okay. Oh, look at this. It's a big red scary thing. It's an Onager Dune Crawler.
Oh, man. This is the crawling section. Okay.
Yeah, these are creepy and crawly. I mean, we keep saying iconic vehicles, but crawlers are kind of weirdly 40k because they're not a vehicle that really exists. They only exist in sci-fi, and there's always been these weird crawlers in 40k. This one, the Onager Dune Crawler, being a recent addition to the lore, but obviously it's been written into the lore. We know them now as primarily Skitarii Admech vehicles, armed with various weapons. It's like almost their equivalent main battle tank, but actually its origins lie in the Mars Universal Land Engine, the Mule, which I know we've mentioned in various episodes before because it was fashioned by the techno-archaeologist Arkan Land. Yeah. The Mars Universal Land Engine, which in initials are MULE, so Mule, was inspired by a type of bad-tempered insectile beast of burden that its maker, Arkan Land, believed walked on holy terror in eons long past. So he has read scraps of information and misinterpreted them to the extent that he has developed this crawler to represent animals that lived in our time. He's done that primarily because he was intending this vehicle to be used as a mechanical workhorse, literally a mechanical workhorse, but it proved so successful that it was rebuilt as a weapon of war, renamed and outfitted with an Mantis force field, replicated by the millions and sent to the front line. Yeah, it's quite cool. But I remember I always thought that it was called an onager because I remember you remember in Age of Empires there was the onager that would fire fire.
It's like a
it's like a catapult.
Thing.
Yeah. So an onager. So I always thought that that's where the name came from, which is probably half of the story. because an onager was a Roman torsion-powered siege engine. But also an onager is actually a species of equine native to Asia. So they're like small donkeys. So
okay.
if you put those two together, it makes sense because it comes from the mule.
Donkey with a missile launcher.
yeah. And actually, to me, when I was looking at them earlier today, the models, they're kind of, the body and the legs, they look a lot like the arachnids from the Starship Troopers. They have that kind of long body that's kind of narrow. So I wonder whether maybe that inspired the model in some way. Who knows? But the actual vehicle itself holds 2 crew, and they're enmeshed within their onager host in a strange symbiotic cybernetic relationship. Its gunner
up the bum.
Yeah, its gunner is a ranger, his formidable marksmanship bolstered by a variety of autoscryer lenses. The machine's driver is a vanguard, his resilience to harmful energies, allowing him to immerse himself in an amniotic tank that allows communication with the onager's machine spirit.
Means
such crewmen such crewmen will be eventually used in the manner of energy batteries, but they are easily replaced by inserting a new vanguard into the filthy electrode-rich soup. So that's that.
Just plug in he's rotting
plug in
away
a new
in the
one.
Radiation, and they just plug in a new one. That's brilliant.
So not quite as sophisticated as various other vehicles we've seen today, but they do their job. So I guess that's all that matters to the Cult Mechanicus.
Yeah, crawlers can go over any terrain, apart from maybe boggy terrain they might struggle with. But there's definitely advantages to crawlers over tracked or wheeled.
Yeah, if you're in
100%.
Yeah, if you're in like rocky or urban environments, then yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
So it makes so much sense that even the denizens of chaos have taken the idea of crawlers. And if we come over here and look behind this big black curtain that says beware, we can see our first example of a demon engine. That's right, a vehicle that doesn't even have a driver. It's a defiler. Again, an absolutely iconic vehicle.
Yeah.
A massive chunk of lead that's impossible to transport anywhere, but is absolutely classic, despite being a horrible model.
Stoney hates this model, doesn't he?
I think Stoney hates it, yeah, but also I think he might really secretly love it deep down, although I've never seen him use one that isn't heavily converted. So these are demon engines. We've spoken about demon engines before on the podcast, so we won't spend too long on this, but Chaos Sorcerers suck a demon out of a warp and put it in this kind of casing. And in this instance of the Defiler, the casing is a very insectoid, spidery, 6-pistoned legs that allow it to kind of scuttle around the battlefield. And in its chest, it often has a Havoc launcher, which is just a wonderfully named chaos thing. Who cares what it does? It creates havoc. We don't need to know any more about that. And a Reaper autocannon, because Chaos love putting scary words in front of stuff that already exists. But what I didn't know until I looked a bit about these is that the 4 Chaos Gods have their own versions of these with different names. So you can get a Slaughter Fiend of Khorne, which is a kind of close combat blood and skulls based platform. Nurgle has the Desecrator, which often switches out its Havoc launcher for a Vomit Cannon, which is another wonderful gun to imagine. You can get for Slaanesh the Debaser, which has a Death Wailer built into it, which is like a massive sonic gun, which I assume just makes everyone fuck themselves to death or shit themselves, one of the two.
Yeah.
And then the Tzeentch version is called a Deceiver, which fires ether cannons, which have been shown in 40k lore to be able to penetrate even the hulls of craft worlds, these ether cannon things. So I like the Defiler because it's got that kind of classic shape, but I also like the fact that it's got to be one of the easiest kits to modify. As long as you've got those funny 6 legs, you can chop up any of the greater demons and stick them on top, or chop up a demon prince and just really mix and match these things, because who cares what the weapons do? You just want a spider that looks cool running around the board. So yeah, Defiler for sure, one of the coolest crawlers out there.
This is a customer announcement. You may have heard over Voxcoms that an orc fleet led by Big Mech McGubbins has been spotted just off the Birmingham subsystem. We would like to assure all visitors of their safety. The local Harbinger Space Marine chapter have set up a considerable defensive perimeter of at least 10 legionaries. To repeat, you will be perfectly safe. Remember, the Emperor protects. Unless you hear sirens.
Well, that sounds pretty serious, Matt. Do you want to leave, or do you want to see the rest of the exhibits?
No. I need to see the rest. But we're by the missile platform section. I can't leave until we go here.
Okay, let's do it. Oh, some more filthy Xenos for you, Matt. I know you're really into this stuff now. This is a TX-78 Skyray.
Yeah, I've always
Tau
quite liked
Empire.
this. I've always quite liked this.
Oh, you have?
I'm glad to see this in
finding
the
out all your
museum.
dirty secrets.
Yeah.
So this is the less loved cousin of the Hammerhead gunship, also the same chassis as the Devilfish transport, but you don't see the Skyray as often, I think, on the tabletop or discussed in the lore, really. I think it's really cool. It's got a 360-degree turret on top of it, which has got Seeker missiles slung underneath, and it has its own kind of targeting marker light systems called marker light target designators that kind of fly up and they find targets for the main missile systems and attach themselves normally to flyers. I think this is kind of an anti-fly vehicle, and that then gives something for the missiles to home onto. So the missiles can then launch and home onto these things. It's got gun drones in the front, similar to the Piranha we discussed earlier, which again is cool because they can detach. But it has slightly worse armor than the Hammerhead. It's not really designed for prolonged anti-tank battle. I mean, even the Hammerhead armor's shit in comparison to a Lehman Russ, but the Skyray is really kind of there to provide very quick anti-fly support and then be removed from the battlefield, which I think is why you don't see it used as often.
I've always liked the Tau vehicles. It's the walkers I don't necessarily like as much, like the Gundam or whatever they're called, sort of style stuff.
Yeah.
I like the floating tanks. And actually, one of the more recent Dawn of Wars, I say recent, but this was like 2008, I did the whole campaign playing as Tau because I thought all the floating tanks and like the broadside battle suits on Dawn of War were really, really fun to play with. And these missile launchers they were really good in the computer game. You had a few of these and they would be firing their missiles everywhere. Be really cool.
But it'd be really cool if our missile platforms could also play music.
Yes, it would. And for that, we need the Exorcist. It's the primary long-range support vehicle of the Adeptus Sororitas, aka the Sisters of Battle. I mean, this is the direct opposite of the Tau vehicle that's smooth and curved and almost like shark-like. The Exorcist is a gothic, square monstrosity with a giant organ on the back. And I don't mean in the phallic sense. I mean in the
Certainly
actual...
not in the Sisters of Battle. How dare you?
Yeah.
What are you
I mean
implying?
in the musical
that one
sense.
Preacher doesn't even have one. He's had to remove it. It's just too stimulating.
It's just such a 40k vehicle. It's not iconic. It's just so 40k. You could not get this vehicle in any other universe.
We should say at this point that the organ isn't really playing music. The organ has missiles that it's firing out of the organ tubes.
Yeah.
But
even
though that's the case, the way of controlling them is essentially by playing the keys of the organ.
When I built my one, I got so excited when I saw in the instruction manual that the woman was playing the keys on like the piano. I thought that was fucking genius. Like I had completely missed that on the information on the website. I hadn't noticed it before. It's probably the same with the old metal one. Never noticed it, but it genuinely got really excited when I realized that she's playing the piano and she almost looks like she's singing along, but actually she's pressing the firing keys for firing these missiles. It is so bonkers that it that it makes perfect sense in the 40K setting.
Absolutely gothic in every way. Like you've got a slab of square metal, you've got missiles coming out of an organ. And if that all wasn't enough, she sat behind a massive stained glass window. So she can't even see anything because there's all this lead piping in front of her. It's utterly ridiculous.
But the in the lore, it actually goes back to the age of apostasy, which is that's where the Sisters of Battle come from, because that's the Goge Van Dyer, isn't it? That's where like the guy tries to say that he's the emperor and various things happen, lots of people die, and then everything's okay. That seems to be the story of the Imperium. But
please flesh it out, Dan. Don't go backwards in time. Flesh that period out. That's exciting.
The Exorcist tanks in service today, some of them actually originate from those first vehicles. So some of them are really hallowed, venerated relics that are used by the sisters, but some are obviously much newer. And there's actually two different patterns. The Prioris pattern, which originates from the Forges of Mars, and the Sanctum pattern, which is constructed on Ophelia 7. But the ones from Mars are venerated more because they're made essentially next door to the Emperor on Terra. The whole vehicle itself is actually named after its main weapon, which is the Exorcist missile launcher. Apparently it has 2 crew, which to me doesn't seem like enough.
Doesn't sound like enough for a Rhino, does it?
No.
Especially when one of them's just sat at the top playing
at the
piano.
top, yes. So that's one person inside the tank.
Who's loading the missiles?
The cherubs. There are cherubs on the back of the model, true. But
put those cherubs to work.
They can. I suppose they could. Maybe 2 of them could carry missiles. Yeah, who knows?
It doesn't matter. It's an organ on top of a tank firing missiles from the stained glass window.
Yeah, we don't need to worry about how it's going to reload. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
This is not a realistic model.
It says, in fact, it says here on the little information plaque next to it, Matt, it says, do not worry how this works. It's all based on faith. So
yeah, it just
we'll
does.
Just have to go with that. All right, Matt. Well, that's the missile platform section. Going up to the last floor, up to the roof for the big guns exhibit.
I've been most excited for this. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Oh my god, look over there. That's the thing I've wanted to come and see. Look at that. It's a Macarius Vanquisher. Oh, come and check this out.
Eldar, is it though?
It doesn't need to be. It's just
convince me.
Okay, all right. I mean, look at it. It's a 250-ton slab of Imperial rule and order. Look at that. I mean, this I think is one of the best looking 40K tanks. It's a variant of the Macarius heavy tank, which is a Forge World kit. It's a heavily armored main battle tank of the Astra Militarum. So it's basically larger than a Lehman Russ, but smaller than a Baneblade. And indeed, it's often referred to as a 2nd generation Baneblade. The Baneblades are actually fairly rare in lore. They used to be rarer. And a lot of Forge Worlds don't have the Baneblade STCs. So those Forge Worlds have tried to get hold of the STCs or the updated plans for these Macarius tanks so that they can build larger tanks than the Lehman Russ while not requiring Baneblade information. It's a tank design that originates or was certainly used in the Great Crusade, but then it was lost. And the Imperium basically didn't use them. So it was used in the beginning, Great Crusade, when the Emperor was still around, and then they seemed to vanish. And it wasn't until the middle of the 41st millennium, that a Magos from the Forge World, Lucius, discovered partial data remnants for the Macarius STC. And after many years of study, enough data was gathered to construct a Macarius, which they did, almost like a prototype, and then sent the information to Mars. Apparently Mars took 200 years to approve production, which they did.
Just to get it through the bureaucracy of the
Yeah.
administratum.
Yeah. So Macarius was approved, and it's obviously named after Lord Solar Macarius, the Imperial Guard commander. And the Vanquisher has twin-linked Vanquisher cannons. So it's one of the classic Warhammer guns where there's two guns on the turret. It just looks so amazing. And the model itself originates from the Death Corps of Krieg Forge World range that sort of was introduced over, I don't know, a 2 or 3 year period. And these sort of came out towards the end of that launch process.
It's amazing the Forge World support for Imperial Guard over the years. It's just been amazing over the years, and essentially creating the whole Krieg range that you know, we've now see back in 40k in terms of kill team. But fair play to the people at Forge World for just making endless tank variants, and this is a great example of one. To take that ultra long barreled big gun that pops tanks from the Lehman Russ and just decide to stick 2 of them together in a twin turret on a much larger tank is just wonderful. Right, well, I can't let you get too carried away up here, Matt, with Imperium. I'm going to drag you over here into the darkness, because it looks like this big gun platform also has a sail. And I can't think of any cooler way to drive a gun round than on a boat with a sail. So let's go have a look at it.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a Dark Eldar Reaper. And this is very similar to the slightly smaller Ravager and Raider tanks that you'll have seen the Dark Eldar players moving around that look like pirate ships because they've got sails on the front, which are utterly pointless, but really, really cool. They've got something to do with like sailing on warp winds and stuff like that, but they just look bloody cool. You can do crazy stuff painting them. I really, really like them. It helps with the high speed. So you can gain speed from it, but also they can kind of like tack a little bit and make sharper turns off the back of it. But the reason it's up here in the big gun section is that the Reaper, as opposed to the other ones, which are more kind of troop delivery, contains a Storm Vortex projector, which is a gun that is huge, that fires an electromagnetic wave cannon. And they do this on purpose. It's like a cannon that hits something and then it kind of sparks out and diffuses electromagnetic shock, an EMP pulse in the area around it, because they're such dastardly bastards in the Dark Eldar that what they want to do is disable the vehicles they're shooting with this anti-tank weapon, but not hurt any of the troops. So if they blow up the vehicles, they blow up the people. They disable the vehicles so they can then fly past with their meat hooks, hook the people out of the vehicles, and then torture them and kill them slowly.
The ship design, it has a 4.5 castle, like old naval ships used to. So it's like full-on pirate ship. It's full-on pirate ship, which I like that. That's really cool.
It's a really beautiful model, but I would worry buying a Forge World Dark Eldar based on what we said earlier about tiny little spindly pieces that resin's just going to snap. If you crack that sail, you're going to be so upset. But I think it's the coolest looking of all of the Dark Eldar boats, and I think it's there's my shout on the big guns. The Dark Eldar Reaper.
That's really
We've probably only got time for one more, Matt, because this siren seems to be getting a bit louder.
Okay, well, we'll just go and look at this one. Look, I can see the barrels over here. There seems to be a trend up here to have 2 barrels and not just one. And this is just a ridiculous tank. It's a double-barreled basilisk, basically. It's a double-barreled Earthshaker cannon. This is amazing. If you don't know what this vehicle is, you need to Google it right now, because the model is lovely. So this is one of the rarest fire support vehicles in the Imperium at the moment. It's heavily armored and it's armed with 2 Earthshaker cannons. This is a durable vehicle that is intended to operate in the heart of combat and provide big fire support while under threat from the enemy's guns, and then redeploying under its own power. So it's more armored than a basilisk. A basilisk should be quite far behind the lines, whereas this is kind of prepared to be a bit more up close and personal with the enemy. The exact origins, like so many vehicles, are not entirely known. Some scholars believe it to predate the Great Crusade. Others cite the similarities it shares with the Malcador, which is another quite cool Forge World tank design, which is itself an ancient design with a forgotten history. But in the 41st millennium, as I say, it's very rare. It's largely supplanted by the Basilisk in Imperial service. The crew compartment is placed in the front of the vehicle, and the twin primary weapons are placed on a central axis point facing rearwards. So the main guns face backwards. The Minotaur is therefore able to reverse into pre-prepared firing positions and then rapidly move forward, which is away from the enemy, through ground as it is already cleared. The only drawback of the vehicle is that it's very complex to construct.
It's amazing. And I have just checked, because I love checking range on ridiculous Forge World, Astra Militarum, and 10th edition data sheet for this. I assume it's in Legends now, but the range of this, the Minotaur twin Earthshaker cannon, is 240 inches.
Oh my god.
Yeah, really cool artillery tank, Matt. Thanks for showing me this. It's in a perfect position up here on the roof if anybody wanted to invade. Great lines of sight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Emergency announcement. We have confirmation that a full-scale orc invasion is underway. Will all visitors please remain calm and make their way to the basement underhive exhibit for best chance of extraction. Building self-destruct protocol will begin imminently to deny orc looting. Thank you for your visit and have a pleasant journey home.
Oh man, that sounds pretty serious. We better go. Let's take the lift.
Oh shit, it's broken. Can't believe this, but the machine spirit has failed us.
We'll have to take the stairs.
Oh shit, stop. Holy shit. That is a Gordon assault tank. We have to go and look at that quickly. We can spare 2 minutes. The orcs won't mind. Let's go.
How did we miss that? You've got 10 seconds to sell me this Death Corps of Krieg Gorgon armored assault transport.
Oh, look at it. It's basically a landing craft on tracks. Think about the start of Saving Private Ryan, but put tracks on it. It carries 50 men. It's manufactured on the Forge World of Valham, and it's primarily used by siege regiments, most notably the Death Corps of Krieg.
Yeah,
it's an entire platoon.
We've got to go, Matt. We've got to go. Oh, Matt, I think we've made it. This is the Subterranean Hive exhibit, but it looks like the main exhibit's gone. There's no plaque. It's just the kind of empty stand.
That's pretty weird.
It says there used to be something to do with the Gene Stealer cults here. Gene Stealer cult limo? Holy shit, is that? It can't be.
Jump in, dweebs. We're busting out here.
Self-destruct sequence complete.